Joining us on our instant reaction and instant preview series is MLB.com Chicago White Sox beat reporter Scott Merkin for the Chicago White Sox. Scott, thank you so much for joining us here on our instant segment number 37. How are things down in the desert, rather?
Cold, but otherwise good.
Well, that's something that typically you don't hear. In the desert, okay. It's cold and everything like that. You typically don't hear that. You'd hear that in our neck of the woods.
Yeah, it's
in New York, yeah, or even
it
in
was
Chicago.
37 yesterday morning. You don't hear that too often out here.
That's wild stuff.
Wow.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and taking some time out on this Friday evening to talk White Sox with us, because we've tried to get this going for a little bit, and I know there's so much obviously going on. But I'm going to throw this to Ian here, because I know he's got a lot of Chicago White Sox questions. I do as well, but I know we want to get things started with Ian as we go along here with our White Sox preview.
Thanks a lot, Joey and Scott. Thank you for taking a little bit of time with us, and hope all is well
Sure.
out west. And I really want to start off talking about the White Sox, about not even talking about last season yet, but really a little bit more about the off season, because this is a team right now that's built to win the American League Central. And in the off season, we had heard some rumors that potentially that Liam Hendriks and maybe even Eloy Jimenez were going to be on the move, maybe for the right package. When you heard those rumors around free agency over the winter, did any of that really shock you, or are we expecting maybe a retooling here of the White Sox in the coming years?
No, I knew the focus on this year was to kind of bring everyone back, hope for good health, hope for bounce backs from guys who underperformed last year, hope a fresh set of eyes, not just Pedro, but the whole coaching staff would change things a little bit. Obviously Liam has more, pressing issues to worry about right now than baseball, with, battling through treatment for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which we always wish him the best for that. It would have made sense with a year left to look and see. He's one of the best closers in the game, see what you can get for him. You have a pretty deep bullpen. But that, I think Rick, as he said at the winter meetings, Rick Hahn, he listens, doesn't mean anything's going to happen out of it. I didn't think Eloy was ever going anywhere. I just did not figure this was going to be a retool this year, as much as give it one more chance. This is last year contract for Grandal. This is the last year of contractual control for Lucas Giolito. Tim Anderson has just one more option year after this one. So, it's something you could really give it a shot this year and see what happens. And then if things don't go well in season, you could even make some moves. But I did not figure they were going to make any kind of significant move, unless it really was kind of overwhelming, where it could also help a system, a minor league system that has some decent prospects, that has some good prospects, but still is ranked overall, one of the lowest in baseball right now.
I guess we could say that really the biggest acquisition, or so much so non-acquisition of the offseason, was the fact that Jose Abreu went to Houston and really helped to bolster the Astros and potentially winning another World Series championship. What does I don't want to say just based on the numbers alone, what does losing Jose to this team do for them going forward? But I kind of want to put that question on the table now. Sans Abreu, what is the plan for the White Sox at first base, and how are they going to try to replace those numbers?
Yeah, Jose's a great guy. A great leader. Not so much a leader by getting in guys' faces or turning tables over or giving impassioned speeches, but more about, was there every day, the same kind of work, played through pain, played through soreness, and put up good numbers really every year. Even, the 1 year that he was injured down the stretch, the 1 year, last year his home run power dropped in the second half quite a bit. I think he only had one home run after the break, or at least the last month or so. He still had good numbers. He still was second in the team in RBIs, still was second in home runs, I believe. Still hit 300, had one of his highest OBPs. I think he's a great fit in Houston. I think that's more of a problem than the Sox losing him, is the Sox, because players leave. Frank Thomas was, not arguably, he is. I didn't cover Luke Appling or Eddie Collins or Shoeless Joe Jackson, but aside from those, Frank Thomas is the greatest hitter in the history of the White Sox franchise. And he left, right? He went to Oakland and had an MVP caliber year when he went to Oakland. Yeah. So guys leave. That's the nature of the business. But going to Houston, who's already world champion, who already has one of the best lineups, if not the best lineup in baseball, and adding him in there, adding him into a place where he doesn't have to deal with April cold because it's a retractable roof in Houston. Adding, where he's doesn't have to be the man all the time. He has to be just one of the guys contributing. That's a big plus for Houston. So Sox have Andrew Vaughn, great young hitter. He was the leader in home runs and RBIs for the team last year, even with a second straight kind of slow finish down the stretch. But he will be back at his natural position just a little bit. There's been 7 Cactus League games. Looks very fluid at first base, and it's his position. So, that's where he was drafted as a first baseman. So they'll be able to fill there. But you do have to fill, the void left by Jose Abreu's leadership, the void left by his numbers too. And maybe that's going to happen. Maybe, by Jose leaving, other guys who kind of relied on him or kind of let him handle the situations, let him talk to the media, let him be out front. Maybe they will step up now. And I'm talking about, more the younger guys. The veterans were great, all through it. But Jose's a integral part. But, I think you can be mad if you're a Sox fan about Jose leaving. I don't think you can be mad when you see he signed, 3 years, $57, $59 million. The Sox were not going to do that. And I think a lot of teams, there were other teams interested. It wasn't just Houston. But I think you can be at peace with that, saying that just was not going to happen. So good for Jose that he went out and got what he was worth.
It seems like, Scott, that, last year we could say that the White Sox underperformed. And obviously to try to bring Tony La Russa back all these years later and had already been a Hall of Fame manager and been inducted, it just didn't work out the way I'm sure you or White Sox fans had planned. But also, I think the one issue that always seems to hamper the White Sox annually is just health and injuries, whether, Yoan is hurt or Luis is hurt, or, I even think Timmy Anderson's missed a little bit of time here and there. I don't want to say how crucial is health to this team, but when healthy, this is a team that should, I don't want to sit here and hamper anything that the Guardians did last year, because with just such a young team and Shane Bieber, they were able to make a lot happen. But this really seems like it has to be the year for the White Sox to try to win the Central.
Yeah, you can't downplay Cleveland because they finished, like a champion, basically. I think they were like 27-10 in their last 37. They swept the Sox when the Sox needed to sweep them, and then just kept on going, put away the Twins in the same sense. So, but yeah, everyone talks about Luis Robert as an MVP candidate. Absolutely. He has a talent. He has the 5-tool ability to be an MVP, but he's got to play more than 100 games. He has not done that yet in his career. Part of it is out of his control. Part of it was, the pandemic, but he's got to stay healthy. The same with Eloy Jimenez. There's been some people in the Sox organization who bristle a little bit when you talk about Eloy being a little injury prone, but I'm not saying that's a negative thing. It's just when someone, if I'm late 5 straight times, then I'm prone to being late, right? So if you get hurt 3 or 4 straight seasons, you're injury prone. Now he came into camp 25, 30 pounds lighter, good for him. It's a desire for him that he wants to still play in the outfield instead of just being the full-time DH, which is understandable. He's 26 years old. I can see where he doesn't want to give up, defense at this young age. It's a tough thing. Even Jose, who is older, never wanted to DH. He wanted to be in the field the whole time. But you got to keep these guys healthy. Grandal worked his butt off in the offseason, and he looks great in spring training. Now, again, we're 7 games into spring training. No one ever made the Hall of Fame on the heels of a great spring training. You got to do it when the numbers count in the regular season. But, that's the key thing, is keeping these guys. And yeah, Tim missed basically from the start of August through the rest of the season with the tear in the middle finger on his left hand. He had to have that surgically repaired. He's another one who's had a few things here and there. So, again, injuries are going to happen. Yeah, I think even the 05 team, which everything went about as perfect as possibly could happen, there were some injuries in there. So you just got to be able to work around it, and you hope they're not long-term like they have been. Give the Sox credit in 21. If you want to, criticize Tony for 22, okay, he deserves some criticism. But he was not 100% healthy, so you factor that in. But you have to give him credit then for getting them through the injuries of 21, right? Robert was hurt. Jimenez was hurt. Madrigal was playing pretty well. He got hurt, was lost for the season, and they kept going. So we'll see what happens. No lockout this offseason. No COVID restrictions, except the normal stuff this offseason. Just baseball. So we'll see how that plays out with everyone healthy and a normal season to come.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, Scott, once again, thanks for coming on with us to talk some White Sox. I want to stick with the lineup side of the baseball for the White Sox. We saw as a Yankee fan, it kind of hurt, but seeing Andrew Benintendi go up there to Chicago and bolstering that heart of the lineup. What do you see there? How did that really come together? Him wanting to go back to that home region over there and lengthening out that White Sox lineup.
Yeah, the Sox always have had interest in him. They were going to draft him. I can't remember off the top of my head now the year Benintendi was drafted, maybe 15. They were going to draft him at number 8, and Benintendi went at 7, I believe it is. Either 9 and 8 or 8 and 7, and they drafted Carson Fulmer instead. They tried to trade for him a couple times. It didn't come through. So it seemed inevitable that he would join, and he is now the highest paid player. It's the biggest contract total of guaranteed money the Sox have given out in their franchise history, which is $75 million. So I think they made him a priority, and they outbid or outoffered everyone else to get him. He's a great guy to have. Again, he doesn't have to carry the team. He's a good left-handed bat. He can hit for some power. He's a great defensive player and can run. So it's a really good fit for a team that's kind of right-handed oriented, and also that needed guys who could play better defense. They were a rough defensive team in 22.
Yeah, so also another thing I wanted to bring up, I know you wrote down a little bit recently about some talks from the White Sox about wanting to emphasize base running, and that sort of got brought up this week. I don't know if it's just going to be a White Sox thing, or is it really going to be a league thing with all the different rules changes that they made this offseason, extending out the bases? Is that just going to be part of the White Sox, back to the fundamentals, wanting to emphasize speed more? Is that just going to be all around the league as well?
I think it'll be more around the league because of just, the rule changes. But the Sox have guys who have speed. There's Tim Anderson, there's Luis Robert, Elvis Andrus. I think Elvis Andrus and Billy Hamilton, who's not a guarantee to break camp with the team, I believe are 2 and 3. If you count D Gordon Strange, D Gordon Strange. If you count him as active still, they're 2 and 3 in terms of active base stealers. So, Benintendi can run. Colas stole base today. He looks very athletic. So I think, as Pedro Grifol said, he didn't say anything about we're going to steal this many bases, we're going to do this. They're going to take advantage whenever it's given to them. So I think that means scoring from first on a double, going from first to third on a single that may not usually lend itself doing that. They're going to really force the issue and be aggressive.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Scott, something else too that a lot of folks kind of, looking at obviously is the pitching side of things. And we know all about how Dylan Cease had, a fantastic season, second in the AL Cy Young voting. But, you look at that depth and you say to yourself, all right, well, Mike Clevenger, he's, has a solid track record, San Diego, whatnot. But then all of a sudden these horrific allegations come up and whatnot. Despite these distractions, and obviously, we don't want to downplay everything that's going on in that story. But if, kind of just sticking towards the baseball side of things, if the distractions are kind of put aside for a bit and nothing comes from it, how big of a depth signing is this for the Sox rotation?
Yeah, I think, when he's healthy, he's been a good pitcher. But I think you really look at the rotation as a whole instead of just one guy. You have Dylan Cease, who was the Cy Young runner-up and has been progressing each year, taking a step forward. Lance Lynn, hurt himself near the end of camp last year in the same place he pitched Thursday, as a matter of fact, out at a Talking Stick in Scottsdale. He's healthy. He's ahead of schedule because he's pitching in the World Baseball Classic. So that's a big thing. And then Lucas Giolito came into camp, I believe it was 35 pounds lighter. Yeah, if I'm doing the math right. Yeah, 280 to 245. And, before last year, the 3 years before that, he was one of the best starters in baseball. And then Kopech thinks he gained a lot from being a starter last year. He's worked on the changeup as more of a pitch to add to the repertoire, if not, a big thing, but a little more active with that. Cease worked on that same pitch too in the offseason. You have Davis Martin, who got some experience last year as a guy who could step in if needed. Kid like Sean Burke is down there. So they have some depth, but I think you just look at the rotation as a whole, and it seems if guys are healthy, if guys are on their game, like Giolito was the 3 years before 2022, you have a pretty good rotation.
Yeah, and you know what? You actually eliminated my follow-up there, which is good. We can get to another question just because the next thing I was going to ask is that sure, we can obviously not talk about the one guy, but also Giolito last season had a really tough year. But that's great to hear that they do have the depth. And kind of now switching over to the other side of things. I know obviously Michael Kopech too slated to be, you figure, what, the team's number 4 starter or number 3 starter, if you will.
I think he'll probably, because of the knee surgery, he'll probably start out as 5 as the home opener. He had the surgery at the end of the year. They said it was a little more in depth than they thought, so they're bringing him along kind of slowly. He hasn't pitched in a game as of yet. Then again, neither is Giolito. He'll pitch this Sunday, but I think Kopech is probably geared for that home opener against the Giants on whatever that Monday date is, the 4th, 5th, I think it is.
I got you. Yeah, or March 6th, actually. Yes. Okay. So then that also, again, perfect. Able to answer the question there that I was gonna to ask too in terms of his status there. So we'll keep on rolling here, Scott. And there's something else too, of course, with Luis Robert, center fielder. Where is he in the development? How has he looked in the beginning of camp too?
He's looked great, and again, he was a guy who came in, a little ahead of schedule because he's now in Taiwan playing for Cuba in the World Baseball Classic.
Yeah.
They're getting ready to go. He's out there with Moncada. And, Pedro has talked about him as an MVP candidate. Now, again, I've never been to a spring training where a manager has been like, oh, boy, we're lost. This team has got no chance, and this guy really looks bad. So, everyone is a champion in spring training. Everyone looks really good. But, the Sox have come in, I think, with an edge overall because they know they were better than what they showed last year. Last year this is the 21st season I've covered the team, and probably the most miserable season overall. And now they've lost 100 during the time I've covered them. They lost 99 during the time I covered them. 2 years after they won the World Series, they finished 72-90. But this is a team last year that's coming off a division title, was clearly thought to be the best team in the Central and maybe a chance to be the best team in the AL. And we're just, to use a Rick Hahn quote, mired in mediocrity the whole season. Never more than 500, never more than 5 over. And they played, it was just not an entertaining brand of baseball. So I think, not just Robert, not just Moncada, not just the pitchers, everyone is coming in with a little chip on their shoulder to kind of try and prove something this year.
Scott, through your eyes, and since you've covered this team for 2 decades now, you're seeing another new manager in Pedro Grifol. His first spring training is the new manager. What have you seen through your eyes, with him and how he's how he's doing as a first year manager? And again, I know it's not the regular season, but now is kind of like the warm up to the regular season. How has he looked through your vantage point?
Very positive, very detail oriented, has a very good staff around him, guys he knows, guys he's worked with before. Very focused on, like the workouts were not especially long, just, there to be there. He talked to the players. He heard what they wanted to do. They worked out hard in a shorter amount of time and got things done. He likes what he's seen. I just think he reminds me a little bit of Ricky Renteria, who was before Tony. Very good baseball man, very highly respected around baseball. Everyone I talked to has talked about, I've known him for 25 years, such a great guy. He deserved this chance. He's going to do a great job there. And I think he really knows baseball, and he seems to have a good fit with the team. Now, again, very early, we talked about this. According to Rick Hahn at the press conference to announce his hire, he was the guy as soon as he had his first interview. He blew them away. Then he kind of won that press conference, has been great with the media since. He's done a great job in spring training. But ultimately, as Rick Hahn always joked, you don't get a trophy for winning the offseason. It's going to be March 30th when they start in Houston till whatever the last day is, I guess, the beginning of October. That's going to tell what it's about. It's just his first year, too. So it's not like if for some unseen reason they end up going, 62 and 100, they won't do that. But 72 and 90, it's not like it's a complete failure. It just means that's a bad start. But I think in the same sense, if they go 99 and 63, it doesn't mean that he's the lock to be this guy every time. But I think he could not have a more positive start than he has. And it just looks different around this team this year. And again, now remember, you're coming off a lockout last year too. So it's a whole different animal even because of that. Yeah. And, it went from maybe, thinking there's no baseball. Am I leaving Arizona to go back home to, they settled and spring training ran until April 6th, and it still was a shortened spring training, to get the full season in. So it's a different thing for everyone in baseball this year. but the Sox just feel different this year. And part of that is Pedro and his group.
Yeah, absolutely. Scott, a couple more questions for you. Of course, joining us, MLB.com, Chicago White Sox beat reporter Scott Merkin. Scott, 2 more questions for you. And something else, too, that I've gotten a chance to see is a couple of stories out there that Elvis Andrus is taking some reps at second base. Is that something that we're seeing here? That's, that's something that he hasn't done in his career.
Right. Yeah, he's going to be their second baseman. Yeah, he was 14 years at shortstop. He is now their second baseman. And, he said having played in the pronounced shifts over the last few years, he already kind of, feels like he's done that spot, but he's never played that in a regular season game. So he's looked good so far. He's a really nice add for the White Sox. They have some good depth there now. They have Romy Gonzalez, who can play all over the diamond. Leury Garcia, who can play all over the diamond. You have some young guys like Lenyn Sosa and Rodriguez. So, yeah, Elvis Andrus will be the second baseman for this team.
Well, that's a big deal. I was, I saw him on the depth chart and I was like, really, Elvis Andrus? It's crazy to see. It's crazy to see how far, where he's gone throughout his career. Scott, my last question for you. Obviously a lot of the players that you had brought up, this team does have a lot of depth, but is there a specific player that you maybe have your eyes on that could potentially be an X factor this season that, most of us as, the outside world doesn't really know about and they might know about down the road? Is there someone that you can pinpoint in the first week of spring training, or is it too early to tell?
Well, I think it's kind of early, but I think the X factor for this team, and it always is someone who's very well known, and that's Tim Anderson. Tim Anderson kind of drives this team. His energy, his fire, his entertaining style. When he's on his game, they're a different team. But if you want a guy, I think people know of him, but if you want a guy that's young and he's a rookie, Oscar Colas. He came in and they said all the right things about how he had to earn the job in right field, but you knew coming in he was pretty much the favorite. He'd have to almost lose the job or show that he wasn't prepared not ready yet for the big league challenge after he had a great minor league season last year. And he looks like he fits in right away. He's got good presence, left-handed power bat, but he's hitting the ball the other way too early on in spring. He can run a little bit. He's a good defensive player. So I think, watch for him maybe even to make a run as one of the better rookies in the AL. But I think he will be the opening day right fielder in Houston. And it'll be interesting to see how he matures as the year goes on. He's got some veterans along with him. He's good friends with Luis Robert. He said they're like brothers from playing even, youth days in Cuba. So that's going to help him a little bit too to adjust. But I think he's a key guy to watch. But again, it's to me, it's always, there's great players. Grandal is great when he's on him, Moncada and Robert and Jimenez. But I think it's Tim Anderson. Tim Anderson is the guy that has to kind of lead through his style to get them to where they want to go.
Ladies and gentlemen, joining us on segment number 37, MLB.com's Chicago White Sox beat reporter Scott Merkin. Scott, thank you so much for joining us here tonight on the Instant Preview Series, and we hope to see you soon and enjoy the rest of spring training.
My pleasure, guys. Glad it worked out.
All right, absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a few short moments here on the Eastern Observer.